Hey folks, David Stewart here. What I'd like to talk about today is what I call the myth of the meritocracy. This is a term that Matt Wellman and I have been using for a number of years, and there's two sort of facets that construct this myth. It's got two faces. The first one is that we live in a meritocracy. That's the first half of the myth. The second one is that we ought to live in a meritocracy, and when the meritocracy is not happening, then it's the result of some problem that we need to fix, like government standing in the way or something about the system is broken. And if we fixed it, then we'd have a meritocracy emerge. So let me take on the first sort of facet of that myth, that we live in a meritocracy, that people's ending place is a result of their merit, their ability to work hard, their special talents that they've developed, rather than luck. Luck in all of its many forms, luck in the form of inheriting talent, inheriting money, or being in the right place at the right time to like have a huge marketing hit or something like that. Most people don't really labor under the assumption that we have a true meritocracy because they have all these examples. It's like, well, this guy has a Ferrari because he inherited a bunch of money. Like, he has no merit that resulted in him being wealthy. He received wealth as an inheritance. You know, this guy has a bunch of wealth because he happened to have the right product at the right time, and it just was a big hit, even though it was pretty much a crappy product, but whatever, people wanted it at that time and it sold big. This guy had the right kind of content coming out at the right time to gain lots of attention and earn lots of money from it. That's that first half of that myth of the meritocracy. Or the last part of that is that somebody was lucky enough to be born with a huge amount of talent that then brought them a lot of money. They were 7 feet tall and were able to be a center in the NBA. There's nothing meritorious about their genetics, right? So most people don't labor under that assumption, but there's always going to be some people who are arguing very intensely that like there's merit that results, that if you look deeply, you're going to see the merit. That it's like, you know, Shaquille ONeal wasn't an NBA star just because he was 7 feet tall. He worked really hard at playing basketball. It's like, yeah, but lots of people worked probably just as hard and didn't receive the success. So him being 7 feet tall had a big part to do with it. The second half of that we ought to live in a meritocracy. To me, that's actually kind of a dangerous sentiment, because that means that you're going to have to rig the game in some way to allow what you conceive of as merit to be what is successful. So you're going to, only people who are exactly 6 feet tall can be in the NBA. Now you have a meritocracy. Only people who are skilled and have developed their skills will do it. But even then, there's going to be talent. Somebody has better vision. Somebody has slightly better nervous system that allows them to play basketball better. It's almost impossible to level the playing field, even when it comes to, you may have heard this discussion with, talking about egalitarianism as like you want to make equal the means, or you want to make equal the starting point, or you want to determine the ends of equality. So that competition between, do we want equal outcomes or do we want equal opportunity? And both of those are kind of wrong, because people don't have equal opportunity. They can't, because they don't have the same genetics. They don't have the same parents. They're not born the same wealth. And even if you made it all the same wealth, they still wouldn't have the same genetics. So it's pretty much impossible to have like a level playing field. And if you ensure that all outcomes are the same, you kill a lot of the things that create benefit. And this is the part that I really want to get to, is that in a free market system, and I'm talking, of course, from a free market perspective, as free a market as we live in North America and to a certain extent Europe and Asia, in a free market, the outcomes are not determined by the meritoriousness of the individual or even the merit of a product. The outcomes are determined by what the consumer wants, and the consumer doesn't always want what is best. We had a discussion on the channel recently about I think Betamax videos, that beta videos were better than VHS videos. Well, why did VHS win? It did all these things, and I put a spin on that's like VHS in a lot of ways was the better of the two, simply because it allowed more people to have access to what they wanted, which was movies on demand. So in some cases, if you had rigged that system, you said, we're only going to make beta, if you're going to have like a USSR thing, in order to not waste the resources that are involved with competition by seeing whether VHS or beta are going to do the best, we're going to just make beta because we've already determined that's the best. And boom. But then you end up with less people having access because less people can afford it. Or if you make sure that every person has it, it comes at a much greater expense because there's not competition determining, the cheaper way to make something, and figuring out all these factors automatically through price mechanisms. So even though VHS is not as good as beta, the outcomes for the consumer were in lots of ways better, because it allowed one standard to take precedent over many standards. And even though two is not really many, two standards usually consumers are okay with, like PC, Mac, Android, iOS. We don't have Android, iOS. There's like Windows Phone. It's like no one really bought Windows Phone. We wanted to choose between two viable alternatives. We wanted less competition, not more, because that in turn makes access to what you actually want, which in the phone example that I'm giving here, if you have fewer standards, that means you have more software available in each of those standards. With VHS, by having VHS be the standard, it's a lot easier for people who are making tapes to figure out who to make the tapes for, how many to make for. It's like you just make all VHS, as many as people will buy, you make that many VHS tapes. And then, of course, because more people have bought and more people are installed users on the VHS platform, there's a more likelihood that manufacturers and producers of content are going to want to make VHS videos. And YouTube's kind of the same way. YouTube being sort of the big dominant video platform means that everybody's going to come to YouTube to make content, which is good for consumers. That means you have more and more choices without having to leave one website. It ends up being a pretty good idea, and you have one standard, one account that you're able to manage all your comments with and that sort of stuff. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a follow-up video tomorrow about meritocracy and YouTube, but I wanted to introduce this idea, the illusion of the meritocracy. So if we actually establish a meritocracy, you may find that the outcomes are not as good. To back up to the basketball example I gave with like Shaquille O'Neal, if you had some sort of meritocracy involved with the NBA, where you really had the people who like worked the hardest or had the best skills always being successful, the NBA would not be as fun to watch. People enjoyed watching Shaquille O'Neal, be an incredibly dominant center and jump over people and slam dunk and do that kind of stuff. People loved watching Michael Jordan be as dominant as he was. We love watching exceptional individuals do great things. That provides value to the consumer. The NBA doesn't pay its stars millions of dollars just because they're making that millions of dollars by entertaining millions of people. So those millions of people who are entertained are receiving benefit from the lack of meritocracy in those sorts of senses, the lack of equality. All of that stuff provides a really good benefit to consumers, even though it may not be obvious. It's like, this guy worked way harder than Shaquille O'Neal, and he developed more skills. He could shoot 3 points. Why isn't he making as much money? That's not fair, right? That's not rewarding his true merit. It's like, but it's about the consumer, and the consumer received more benefit from Shaquille O'Neal, and all the little mechanisms ended up working to the end result that Shaquille O'Neal ended up getting paid a lot of money to do what he did. So that's the idea there, that the first one, we don't live in a meritocracy. The second one, we ought to live in a meritocracy. Both are not true. We don't live in a meritocracy, and we really don't want to live in a meritocracy. If we lived in a meritocracy, that would mean that we would have to set standards which are not universal, and that's because all of us are different people. The consumer, which is just the end user of stuff, the person who wants things and uses them, which is everyone. Everyone's a consumer. We're all different people, and we have different wants and different needs. So to assume that which is best by some other standard will automatically be the best for each individual is not correct. The best, beta was the best tape, but if the player cost more to buy, that's not the best for everyone, because some people don't have that extra money to spend on the player. And you could go down the line with that. It's like, oh, well, I really like Brooks running shoes. So it's like, by Brooks shoes are like, for me, they're the best, but someone else could put them on and be like, these hurt my feet and they're awful. It's like, oh, but these have the best, the best compression. They don't compress as much over time. They wear out. It takes longer for them to wear out. All these, I could list all these things that make them the best sneaker. But someone else is going to be like, they don't fit my feet and they don't do what I want them to do. They're crap. And that's the thing, is everybody has a different standard. There is no like objective standard for most things. Everyone has different wants and needs, and when you get rid of this idea that the best thing ought to be the one that wins, each person tends to get something that's pretty good for them. And that's pretty much all I had to say about it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And please join my mailing list. We don't know how long I'll be on YouTube or other content creators will be on YouTube, so make sure you're following them outside of YouTube. You can find me at facebook.com/David Van Dyke Stewart. I do daily content on that regarding music and other kinds of things, and I'm very, very available to chat on Facebook. So that's facebook.com/David Van Dyke Stewart. Join my mailing list. It is linked down below, or you can go to dvspress.com/list, and there are two different mailing lists. You can join one, which is the general list, where you get all the news, and the other one, which is just a freebie list if you're only interested in getting like the odd free book here or there when I do a giveaway. So I do appreciate you watching, and I hope you guys will have a great day. Leave me your comments down below in regard to this, and I look forward to reading them.